Well, in the beginning, Al Gore invented the internet, and he saw that it was good. And then on the second day, he reached down into the ground where formerly there was a glacier which had just receded, scooped up a handful of dirt, and created unto himself the Instapundit, and since then everything's been pretty cool. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to have with us here in the PJTV studios my friend and the Blogfather, a patron of the arts in this modern digital age. Our very own Insapundit, Glenn Reynolds, is visiting from Tennessee. Glenn, it's a great pleasure to have you here.
It's great to be here, and I kind of like that creation myth.
It's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So what I thought we'd do is you've been such a pivotal part of the blogosphere, and you're the face that's launched 1,000 blogs. It's really true, mine included, certainly. So I thought maybe it'd be interesting for our viewers to kind of take us through the time from when you started to where we are sitting here today. So it's the summer of 2001, and 9/11 hasn't happened yet. You're looking forward to another year of getting walloped by the Gators. You got nothing to do down in Tennessee, yeah. And
cheap shot.
And well, it's not beneath me. And so you decide to start one of these blogs, which no one had ever really heard of. The name is kind of an odd name. What got you started? What made you pick up the digital pen?
Well, I've been reading blogs for a while. Some of the very early blogs, so early that they were still calling them me-zines. Like Mickey Cass, Virginia Post Rail, and so on. And I thought they were pretty cool, and I liked reading them. And I was commenting then at Slate.com's reader forum, which is called The Fray, and I used a couple of different pseudonyms there. One of them was my techno stage name, AG Android, but another was Instapundit, which actually is related to Al Gore. That comes from an old Tom Tomorrow cartoon about Al Gore as a talking robot. But the other was Instapundit with a little TM after it, which I would use when I had some sort of pithy, pundit-like remark to make on something. So I ran across the Blogger platform, which at that point was still being run by Evan Williams out of his basement. It was long before Google bought it and made him rich. And it looked easy, so I signed up and I started an account, and I was sort of wondering what name to use, and I decided to use the Instapundit. That kind of worked. And I started that, it was the first week of August in 2001. And I thought, I've got a fair number of friends who are academics and journalists and things like that. I could probably get a good high-quality readership of a couple hundred people. And so I started posting, and it was mostly, technology, lifestyle type stuff, a little bit of politics, but I figured have kind of a light tone. This was the summer when shark attacks were the big news.
Right. That's exactly right.
And so that's kind of where I was coming from.
And then 5 weeks later, the world changes.
Yeah, and it was doing pretty well. Like at the end of August, I talked to one of my colleagues who was sort of interested in the project, and I said, I had 600 page views yesterday. He was like, wow, that's huge. I was like, I know. And by like September 10th, I had 1,600 page views, and I thought I was really huge. And then September 11th happened. And I put up a post very early on September 11th, like at 10:30 in the morning, sort of said, this is what's happened, and this is what I think it means, and here's some things to look forward in the future. And James Toronto picked that up and put it on Best of the Web later that day, and I wound up with about 5,000 page views that day, and it just kept climbing from then on. Now it's in the neighborhood of 500,000 page views in a day, more when there's more news, and that's sort of how it's happened.
Right after 9/11, people were just starving for information anywhere they could get it. 24/7, what's going on? What the hell's happening? This wave comes to the blogosphere. I started in end of 2002, in December of 2002. But right then in those early days, you always feel like when you started, that was the golden age, right? Golden age began with me when I got into the fray. But right around then, just before the invasion of Iraq, it seemed to me that there were just spectacularly good writing and thinking coming along. You had Steve Den Best over at USS Clueless, and you had Misha at the Anti-Idiotarian Rottweiler, and you had Rachel Lucas, and you had Kim Dutoit. There's just this sudden rise of citizen journalism, which I suppose was a lot of inspiration for your book, An Army of Davids, right? This flowering, this ocean of regular citizens contributing real value.
Well, the thing people don't realize is that the United States has a really deep bench. I mean, you look at the sort of what people would call the cream, or whatever it is that floats to the top in journalism and other fields, and you might not think it's that great. But what you don't realize is that there are literally millions of people out there who have a lot of talent, who can do things that, in fact, a lot of times the famous people don't know how to do because they don't know things. People who are engineers who write blogs know about engineering. People who are soldiers who write blogs know about soldiering. People who are journalists mostly know sort of how to hit their marks and look at the camera, right?
That's right.
Hi, camera. That's really sort of how that works. And that was pulled out because basically people looked at the coverage, and I got so many emails on the day of September 11th about this saying, I like your blog because I can't stand looking at the TV anymore and watching them show the same footage of the planes hitting the towers and the same talking heads saying the same stuff in a loop over and over and over. Right. And what the blogs did was they started trying to bring in new information. And that's, that's what blogs do.
Let's take a look at what I thought was the most remarkable thing I've ever seen in the blogosphere, but maybe just in general. And this really goes to your Army of David's idea. And that was the Bush memos, the fake Bush memos in the election of 2004. They post this fraudulent document. They put it on CBS. Dan Rather stands by the story. They put it on CBS.com. A guy named Buckhead, I think, at one of Free Republic, right, notices that there's a little elevated TH, right, which is only a word processor artifact. Charles Johnson then recreates the document. But what's interesting is this. To this day, Rather maintains that this was an organized, structured rebuttal. But it wasn't. It was a machine that built itself out of all the cogs lying on the table. How did that work?
Well, I mean, that's the fascinating thing about how things work is everybody has their little piece they can add, and they add it. And it was amazing how you got all these people. You had people who had worked as typewriter repairmen coming in to talk about, well, there were a few typewriters in the early 70s.
in 67 couldn't do that. Right. Yep, that's right.
And all that kind of knowledge that came in. And it really couldn't have been done in a centralized top-down fashion. Somewhere maybe there was a war room with Karl Rove waving these memos around and saying, find out how to prove they're fake. We know these are fake, but we can't prove it. How do we prove it? Well, if they were, they didn't do it, right?
That's right.
It was a bunch of random people who were insurance salesmen or real estate agents or assistant professors or whatever out there who pulled it all together out of their own little bits of knowledge and rapidly, because the internet lets you do that, assemble it into a coherent whole.
How many emails do you get a day?
Ooh, 1,500 maybe. I mean, it's a lot. I don't count them, but it keeps going up.
I'm responsible for a few of those. If you were to advise somebody, if somebody wants to send you a link for something they've written as a blog post, and they want to get your attention because they want the miracle of the age, which is the Instalaunch, right? By the way, I mentioned this to you earlier. One of the great tragedies of being you is that you never get to experience an Instalaunch. You never get to know that thrill of having written something that you expect, as you said, may be read by 15 or 20 people. All of a sudden, your hit counter goes from 20 or 30 a day to 10,000, 20,000 a day, just spikes, and you're just, most of those 60 hits are you just hitting the counter trying to find out how you're doing. So when this Instalaunch comes, when you pick up a story and you link it on the Insapundit page, this massive flow of traffic goes that way. If somebody wants to get your attention, they obviously have to write quality material, but in terms of approaching you, what's the best way to do it?
Well, first of all, the advice that Eugene Volokh gave to new bloggers a long time ago is absolutely, he says, sell the post, don't sell the blog. The email that I get a lot, which I find, it's kind of sad because there's not much I can do. Somebody says, I've started a new blog, I hope you'll link to it. And you go to their blog and there's one post on it that says, well, I've started my new blog. And that's just really not something that is of very much interest to anybody else. The things that really are great is if you've got an angle on something that's big news right now that nobody else has.
Especially if you've got an area of expertise on it where it lets you speak at authority.
An area of expertise or a way of looking at it even that's different is very useful, and that's very helpful. The other thing is, I get so many emails, and I've thought of trying to systematize it, or you could hire somebody to do it. You could have some kind of text search routine to run on it. I'd rather just miss stuff because I'm too busy, because that's at least random, and I'm not systematically failing to get stuff. So I'm just going to miss some stuff. The other thing is, blogging is like DJing in that there may be a lot of perfectly good records right there in the box, ready to play, and they're all good, but only one record is going to be the next record, because only one record is right to be the next record, right then and there. So sometimes it just doesn't fit. I know this sounds really stupid.
No, it's profound.
I mean, no, it's not. But it is how I work. It is like DJing, and that you sort of got a stream going. You've got stuff, and what post comes next flows from the posts that are before and the posts that are going to come after, and it's all. And sometimes people send me good stuff, and I know it's good stuff, and sometimes I'll try to cram it in later somewhere, but sometimes it just doesn't make it, and it's not because I don't like it or I don't like the person who sends it or anything, but sometimes it's just it just doesn't feel right at that time.
Final question for you. Insapundit is such an enormous success because what you basically are is you're a filter. 1,500 news stories come to you a day, and you pick 20 or 30 that you think personally are interesting. And the reason people come to Insapundit is I don't have to look at the entire web. I trust your judgment. That's really what it comes down to. People trust your judgment. What do you think it is about your background? Do you have any idea at all what it is about you as a filter that's been so popular with Insapundit?
Not really, but if it's anything, it's probably that I'm a Renaissance dweeb. You know, I know a little bit about a lot of things, and that gives me some sense of sort of what's more interesting and not. And of course, the great thing about a blog is I get to ride my hobby horse, you know, and whether or not people really care. And Roger Simon was joking about Instapundit a couple of years ago. He said, "Come for the politics, stay for the nanotechnology."
That's
I mean,
exactly
that's kind of how it works. But you know, I have a lot of different interests, and apparently a lot of people find at least enough of them interesting to come back and see what I've found today.
Well, I've said it to you before, I'd say it to you again. If that weren't a wedding ring, I'd kiss it. I would not be in this chair without you. It's been your
Thanks
support
so
and your
much.
links over the years that have just taken me out of absolute obscurity and put me in the magnificent setting we see here today, ladies and gentlemen. Folks, this is a great honor to have with us again today my friend Glenn Reynolds, who's the Instapundit. You can read his work, as many, many, many people do every day, at Instapundit.com, part of the big PJTV family here. And Glenn, it's been a pleasure having you with us today.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you.
For PJTV, I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next time.